Hey Evelyn, how are you?
Hi.
Hey.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're fine on your end. Yeah, the whole professional mic and everything.
Yeah, musician lifestyle.
I'll get an actual mic eventually.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Your day going all right?
Yeah, it's been pretty relaxed. I was working in various different mediums for the day, and now I'm doing this.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day for it.
Yeah, happily.
Alrighty. I guess to like jump into it if you want. I like to have people I have on introduce themselves. So you want to give us your name, your pronouns, what is well no, you're just solo artist. You don't have to say what instruments you play. Just that sort of thing. Sorry, have it spiel.
Yeah. So my name's Evelyn. I play in the band Evelyn Gray. It's not really a band, it's just me. I use they, them, and she, her pronouns. I'm a singer, I'm a guitar player. I play the electric bass. I play a few other different instruments. Piano was my first growing up, and I write and record sad indie rock music.
Random thing I guess to start out with. I saw you what I think about a month ago or so on the tour you were doing, and I saw you about Austin. You said I think you told me there was like going to be like 20 dates, but then like all but three got canceled. Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah, that's correct.
So how did that feel as an
Sad
artist?
times.
Just for like COVID to take everything.
Well, it's funny because it's the second time that that happened to me. In 2020, I was just wrapping up a tour in late February, and then I was booked out until late August that year. And then everything kind of got wild all of a sudden, and my whole calendar was completely empty all at once. And then I was really hoping that I was going to get to be able to tour again because I hadn't been on a tour playing my own music for, at this point, about 2 years. So it was a little frustrating, a little soul crushing to have everything get canceled again, but I can't say that it was entirely unexpected. And it was a nice chance to embrace surrendering to the circumstances of the universe.
How much had you toured before the pandemic? So I know like your first album came out in 2019. I don't know what part of the year, so I don't know how long your solo stuff was around before the pandemic.
Right, yeah. So I put out that record in the summer, and then I did about a month of touring just around the continental US. So some West Coast states, some East Coast states, a little bit of the South, and a bit of the North, kind of just the perimeter of the country, not too much of the Midwest. And then I did another month in like winter going from 2019 into 2020. And that's about all I've done for touring for my solo work. I also play guitar in a band and have done some touring with them. And years ago, I did touring in like my late teen to early 20s.
Gotcha. Yeah, your other band's Hit Like a Girl, right?
Yeah, I'm the guitar player for them.
How long have you been with that band?
I guess I've been working with them like since maybe summer of 2020. We weren't really doing shows then. I was just kind of like I got brought on to do some transcription work for them because they had a session guitarist do a lot of the leads on their new album, and they needed someone to learn those parts by ear and then translate them to guitar tablature so that other people could be learning them. And then they were slated to play Audio Tree Live in November of 2020. and asked me to play guitar for that session since I was already familiar with all of the new recorded work, and I've been playing with them ever since.
How did that feel to play on Audio Tree?
Oh, it was a dream come true, really, like crying joyful tears. I've been a fan of the Audio Tree production since, I don't know, for probably around a decade now, so it was really special. I don't even know how long they've been doing Audio Tree.
Yeah, now that you say that, it makes me wonder how long they've been around. I've never thought to look up when it started.
Yeah, I remember watching them when I was in undergrad, which was a long time ago now.
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, 9 days ago, I turned 29.
Oh, well, happy late birthday.
Thank you
Um,
so much. It's a gift to be alive.
so do you have any tour plans coming up for your solo work to like basically, I guess, go back from what didn't happen?
Yeah, I'm trying to reschedule a lot of those dates, and it looks like everything's going to be happening in the month of May. So I'm getting very excited because that's getting very close.
Gotcha. So I guess like I should jump in and talk about your music. I think I saw it on your Instagram. You recently posted a good bit of material onto your Patreon. Did I read that right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So I guess two questions about that. One, will it eventually be released off Patreon, or is it going to be like Patreon exclusive forever?
Great question. There are some things that I post on Patreon that are Patreon exclusive, never getting, or at least no plans to release them in the future. But it's also a place where I post a lot of my content that I plan to release later on before it comes out to like streaming services and Bandcamp and all of that. This last batch, both of those things. So there are some things that I uploaded that will just stay in Patreon. And then there was another thing that I uploaded that should be coming out in a few months.
How's that music going to sound compared to the stuff you've released up to this point?
Ooh, the same, but also totally different.
Very exciting.
Yeah, I I have been having a lot of fun doing bigger arrangements with like drums and keys and strings, and like my first record was very much just me and the electric guitar and what I could do with looping that I do live. However, with the music that I'm working on now, I am enjoying the exploration of things that I couldn't do in a live setting all by myself, just because it's nice to work on music with like production and the listener in mind rather than just focusing on what one person, being myself, can recreate in a live setting.
Are you recording all the parts, or are you having other people like record some of the different instruments and stuff?
I'm doing most everything except for the drumming. Yeah, and then I do have a person who's gonna and then I have a person who's going to be tracking cello for a few songs that I'm working on as well.
Nice. So what went to the decision to like do the Patreon? Or how long has that been going on?
I started it in 2020 with the pandemic happening, just because I was looking for a space to be sharing things, especially because I didn't have the outlet of live shows. So it was nice to be able to set aside some time and record some new music and not have like the amount of stress and tension that goes into creating for consumption and kind of just creating with a little more freedom to explore things that I might not otherwise do in terms of what I would want to release for streaming or what I would want to be performing at a live show, and just have an outlet for all of that other art that I make. Because I really enjoy like ambient soundscape building and also like very dark ambient creations that might not have as much of a pull in like the streaming world and in the live setting, but it's still something that I very much enjoy creating and spending time with. So it's nice to have a place for those compositions to call home.
What kind of response have you gotten with your Patreon?
Oh, not like an overwhelming response. I just kind of started taking it seriously a few months ago because just deciding to start something new right at the onset of a pandemic was maybe not the best time to be doing that. So I wasn't really as good about updating as I would have liked to have been. But now that things are kind of settling and I have a lot of music that I'm working on all at once, I am taking it a little more seriously and planning months ahead about what I'm going to be creating and releasing on the Patreon. So I'm hoping that it can pick up some steam and be a little bit better received than it has been historically.
So what's your songwriting process like?
It's very spontaneous. I am not a person who puts a lot of thought into my songwriting. Rather, I am a person who puts a lot of feeling into it, if that makes sense. I guess there's this thing called automatic writing for when you're like doing written word and you're kind of just like writing whatever is coming to your mind in the moment. And my songwriting kind of takes that approach where generally I'll be playing guitar or playing the piano, and I'm just trying to express what I'm feeling through that instrument. And then the tonalities that I'm creating on the instrument then kind of dictate the words that start forming. So I'm like singing lyrics that I am making up on the spot while I'm playing something I haven't played before. And it's just all happening simultaneously and spontaneously.
So you're freestyling.
I guess so, in a way, yeah. And I always have to make sure my voice recorder is on, otherwise I'll never remember what I did.
How often do you forget to turn it on?
Oh, too often. I've lost some gems for sure.
So how's that working? You were saying you're trying to like plan like a couple months ahead for your Patreon. So how's the interplay, the spontaneity approach with trying to figure out stuff months in advance?
It's really about just setting aside the time to do as much music making as I can so that I have kind of like a base of things that I've created to pull from when I'm curating my uploads to Patreon for the month.
Yeah, so I thought it was interesting. I read some article from it was around the time your album released saying that when you made that album, you like sold your TV, like canceled Netflix and stopped playing video games was the list it gave, or just like pure songwriting. So like, did you bring that stuff back into your life, or do you still not do the vacuum for songwriting?
I've actually not brought any of that back into my life still to this day. And it's been like close to 3 years going strong. No TV, no video games, no Netflix. I'm very easily distracted.
In what ways do you think that having the vacuum, I guess, I don't know if that's the best word, other than just lack of distractions, how's that influenced the way you go about writing things?
I like to think that by limiting the media that I'm taking in, I'm able to be more present with exactly how I'm feeling and not like pulling from other people's creations as much, so that I can focus on writing about my lived experiences rather than like what I'm observing happening in the world. Because for me, songwriting is very much about that feeling of catharsis in expressing the hard and dark things that I might be experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And by cutting off a lot of those external media sources and kind of just living in the vacuum, as you put it, I'm kind of forced to just be present with myself and not really like turn off the way that I'm feeling. I don't have anything to numb that with. So music gives me the ability to channel my experiences into another form that can then go on to take its own meaning.
So I know you use the word catharsis for that. So like, what does that mean for you in terms of like using music for that?
Ooh, often it takes the form of me on my floor crying in the middle of writing music.
Is that going to be the intro or outro to any of the tracks?
No, I don't want to have me crying on the album.
Sorry, that probably came off as a rude question almost.
But I mean, it is a real part of my process for sure. It's the music has been the best way for me to process my emotions.
When I met you at the show, you were doing like tarot readings, and you said that like that was something kind of new you were learning. So is that ever served as like an inspiration for your songwriting?
I don't think so. I think it's more just a means for me to be checking in with myself and my journey and making decisions that are as informed as they can be. However, I think it could be a very fun project to work on a series of concept albums about the tarot.
Since it was coming on the Patreon.
Perhaps, but that'll be a later Evelyn thing.
Fair enough.
Current Evelyn has too many projects already.
Also, when I saw you play, you had said like while you're playing that you were trying to not talk as much like during your set and just like play the music. So what went into that decision?
I talk so much in my set normally that I'm not able to play as many songs as I would like to in the like time constraint of sets. So I'm trying to be a little more tactful about all of the introductions that I give everything and just let the music speak for itself.
Fair enough. For what it's worth,
I think I still talk for like 3 minutes straight.
I like that.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just saying I like it when artists like to talk about the songs and stuff and like break it up and have, I guess, almost like mixed media because you're just talking and music.
Yeah.
I know like most of your songs have like a very like, I don't know if this is a very good way to describe it, like drawn out vocal delivery. Like it, and I mean, I think that definitely gives a good like delivery of the music and the lyrics and whatnot. It makes it very impactful, I guess is the word. At the same time, it's like when I read the lyrics, I'm like, wow, these could like be very punchy songs as well. Just like, I don't know, punchy, like very like quick. And this is coming out very, very awkwardly. I don't know how I'm trying to say it, but I'm just, I guess, asking, is that a very purposeful way that you draw it out like that? Or is that just kind of like just the way you happen to write?
I think it's just a byproduct of the way that I'm going about writing most of the time. Because really, it is just like that spontaneous singing of words over what I'm playing. So oftentimes I am just drawing them out as I'm waiting for the next word to come.
Oh, because of like this spontaneity you're saying.
Right. Yeah, I find that I don't have usually a lot of lyrics per song. So I think that that's probably also a reason why it gets drawn out. And also, I just love holding a note for as long as I physically possibly can. It's very fun for me.
I feel like that'd be part of the catharsis of just like physically trying to sustain something for that long.
Yeah, definitely. It's like a workout too. Ooh, yeah, just like screaming for 30 seconds straight.
It comes out very well. Uh, so I know like looping and all is like a really big part of your music and your like your live set and whatnot. So like, what all pedals do you use? Just I'm interested about like gear and stuff.
Phew. Yeah. So I have maybe 15 or 16 or maybe 17 pedals on my pedal board right now. I just upgraded my board to a bigger one so that I could fit more pedals on it because I was running like 12 different pedals off of a single daisy chain, and I decided that it was time for me to start being an adult, and I got a power supply, but then I couldn't fit all of the pedals on my board and the power supply, so I needed something a little bit larger, and then I was able to fit a few more pedals on the larger board, so it was really just a win-win situation there. But my current signal flow is here, let me just look at it and I'll tell you. All right, so I go into a Boss TU2 tuner, and then that goes into a Moore slow engine, which is kind of just has one function. It's like an auto swell, and you can set the like rate as to how fast the swell happens. And then that goes into a little Moore yellow comp. They're just like the two mini pedals. And that goes into my Distortion, which is really early in my chain. It's an electronic audio experiments longsword, which has two settings. So you can have two different gain amounts with that share an EQ, and you can engage them individually, which goes into a Boss Harmonist pedal, into a Maris Enzo, into an Earthquaker transmitter, and then an Earthquaker rainbow machine, and then a Boss digital reverb slash delay. And then that goes into an ABY because I feed all of my mono pedals into each other, which then go into the ABY, and then that feeds into all of my stereo pedals. So then I can isolate my source between two amps. I play stereo out and true stereo, and I can change with the ABY switch which amp on which side of the stage it's coming out of at a particular time. So since I'm doing a lot of looping, I often have to like think about making sure that the sound source isn't going to be too muddy if everything's just coming out of the same amp, which is why I put the ABY switch in so that I could send things to different sides. That all goes into a Hardwire RV7, which is a reverb that I mostly use the reverse reverb function in. And that feeds into a DD7, into another DD7, into a Strymon Blue Sky, and then finally my Boomerang 3 phrase sampler. And that's all the pedals.
I love it. I love how we have everything on the table now. I know it sounds like getting a bigger board is like having a goldfish. It just grows to the size of the container.
Yeah, definitely. There are still some pedals on my shelf that aren't on the pedal board, so but everything that I want to be there is there.
Fair enough. Yeah, you definitely sounds like you have a lot going on. I never really thought about all that would go into having like having two different speakers and needing to think on the fly about which one to switch to and stuff. That's really interesting to learn. I'm, I don't know, like with that many, I don't have a lot of experience with like pedals. So like how adding or taking away one, like if you're trying to add one pedal to that, like how does that affect? Like it seems like there's already like a big wave. So how much does one pedal necessarily change that? I'm trying to think of how to ask that.
I guess it depends on the pedal.
I guess it's experimentation.
Yeah, definitely a lot of experimentation and just like where in the chain of signals you place a new pedal, it's going to then interact with anything that is placed in front of it. So, like, I have a delay that's really early in my signal flow, and then I have delays after it. So, I can like have that delay triggered on, and then I'll play like one note on the guitar and it will go through the delay, and then that delay will go through another delay, and then that delayed signal could go through another delayed signal and just get totally out of control. So it's a lot about placement and thinking about like how you would want a pedal to interact with the other pedals when you have a lot of them.
It's definitely above my pay grade, but something that seems incredibly interesting. I feel like I'm supposed to have like 1,000 questions about it. I don't know what to ask. You have a pretty different sound for like when you play your solo stuff versus what I've heard from Hit Like a Girl. So like how much do you bring to the table in terms of like songwriting or like your own sound for your parts?
Kind of 0%. Just like in terms of when I was getting involved with the band, they already had like multiple albums of a discography. So it was really just me learning their already recorded material and kind of just like putting a little bit of my own spin in terms of the specific tones that I use and that I can make with the pedal board. However, a lot of the songs for Hit Like a Girl are imagined for like a 5 or a 6 piece band, and we generally play as a 4 piece. So I'm doing a lot of live looping in those sets as well in order to cover more ground as one guitarist. I'm often like playing a guitar part, looping it, and then playing what the other guitar on that song is doing at the same time. Or I have a pedal that I can use to modulate synthesizer sounds, and I use that to fill in space where on the recorded material there isn't really guitar happening, but there is synth happening. So I take the synth parts and I play them on the guitar through a series of pedals. However, I will say the band is working on some new material, and I did help with the writing process for that, but I'll let that recorded material speak for itself whenever it does come out. And I'm very excited for it.
Is there a release date?
There is not currently a release date, but it should be coming out this year.
Aren't you guys do some shows in Britain in June?
Yeah.
Have you ever been overseas before?
I went to Western Europe for like a week and a half in between undergrad and grad school, but I have never played music outside of the country, so it'll be a first for me for that. And I've never been to England or other parts of the UK. I think we're just playing in England and Wales, so that'll be totally new for me.
So what's booking internationally like? Like, how does that happen?
That is not something I have ever had to do for myself, so I don't know. I just show up and I play the guitar.
You think you'll try to do that for your solo work?
Well, I can't say for sure, but there is definitely a very good chance that I will be performing my solo work outside of the country this year as well.
Awesome. So what did you study in grad school?
In grad school, I studied music education.
Gotcha. Yeah, aren't you doing that now as like a job? Or like, don't you do a lot of Zoom sessions or something for it?
Yeah, I do private guitar and piano lessons, both in person in Connecticut and over Zoom worldwide. It is nice to be using my degree because there was quite a period of time where I wasn't, and I was facing some existential dread because of it.
How many folks do you get that are like not locals to your area?
I'd say probably like anywhere from 50 to 75%, just because of how the internet works. I find that I'm able to connect with a lot of people who are not in the area. And additionally, when I am on tour, I'm also able to connect with a lot of people who aren't in the area where I currently inhabit. So it's usually about an even split, like in terms of doing in person local lessons and doing Zoom lessons.
What's the like local scene like in Connecticut or in your part of it?
Mostly it is bigger bands skipping over Connecticut to play in New York City and Boston. Then there's like a lot of bars, like mid-cap bars, anywhere from like 100 to 300 capacity rooms. And then a few smaller DIY spaces, some that closed because of the pandemic, some that are still around from before then, and some newer ones as well. And there's a lot of local musicians. There's a lot of people playing music in New Haven County and Connecticut as a whole.
Yeah, didn't you live in New York for a bit?
I did, yeah, I did live there for about 2 years.
So what made you like I guess move there and then decide to move back?
Oh, I moved to New York City for my graduate program. So I was there for 2 years and I was looking into staying, but then I moved back to Connecticut to co-own and operate, like to like build from the ground up a nano brewery.
So it's just a nano brewery and a microbrewery.
Oh, nanobrewery is like super small scale. I think a microbrewery is like up to 250 barrels of beer per year, and a nanobrewery is, I forget what the barrel per year cutoff is, but it's like has to be a certain cutoff. Oh, produces less than 15,000 barrels of beer per year for a nano brewery.
How did that project turn out?
They're still going.
Are you still doing it?
No, I did the, so this was all happening like pre coming out as trans, and everything was in my dead name. Most of the co-founders were having a really hard time using my name and my pronouns. I also really wanted to stop drinking alcohol, so it wasn't really the place for me to do that in. So I ended up exiting about 3.5 years ago.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, it always sucks when the sissies don't know how to respond very well.
That's a term that I use too. I really like that term.
Those who know.
Yeah, it is. It is an issue a lot of the time when it's really not an issue. It's really not hard. But yeah, that was a really hard time in my life.
It's understandable. Yeah, a lot of your songs deal with dysphoria and whatnot. And I know, like, reading a couple of articles of people writing about your music, I mean, you seem to have gotten a pretty good response. I want to say at least one of the articles, or it was like the author basically said they were cis or whatever. And it seems like you've got a good response from people who are about these songs about dysphoria and whatnot outside of like trans people. So what's that feel like as an artist to connect with people in that way?
Yeah, I guess I recognize that while gender dysphoria specifically is a very trans thing, the concept of having a body and not always loving it is something that I think all humans have gone through in one way, shape, or form. I think that in my earlier part of my career, I was a little more like I wanted to be more palatable to cis straight people, if that makes sense. Whereas now I want to be more of a menace to cis straight people.
Ready to hear that music.
Yeah, it's gonna be very different. I guess I just like I was taking an approach to discussing gender dysphoria and like always happening to use language that wasn't specifically trans, but I really want to like carry that with me still, but also move forward into a world that is very clearly and specifically trans.
When you're out playing live, do you have many like trans folks like come up and give you like a very positive response about it? I figured it would be yes, but I don't know.
I have had a lot of really special interactions at my shows, and it is very much one of the reasons why my work is so important to me and why I want to continue pouring myself into it the way that I do. Um, yeah, it's really special when people tell me that they had a really strong reaction to what I'm sharing on stage. And it's probably almost every time that I play that someone in the room is queer and or trans and wants to talk to me about that afterwards, and it's something that is really special to me.
Your songs are definitely very evocative, and I think that they're very, I feel like they're different than what most people, or at least in my experience, what I would generally see at a shows. I think it does well to elicit a very emotional response as an audience member, just because first of all, like your emotion carries so strongly through it, and then it's also not something it's also comes off very new, because I don't think it's generally performance style that's commonly seen, I guess.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I do feel similarly that there are not a lot of people performing the way that I am. Like, I find it hard to explain when someone asks me, "Oh, what kind of music do you play?" I don't ever really have a good answer to that other than like crushingly sad.
That's the genre.
I guess I like to think of it as performance art just as much as it is music. And it's difficult when I'm trying to book shows because most people want to book bands who sound like other bands, whereas I don't really like have that category so much in terms of the catalog of music that I have currently released.
What kinds of bands do you normally find yourself playing with then?
Kind of just all over the place in terms of genre. Like I've played sets with heavy bands and I've played sets with like acoustic singer-songwriters and shoegaze and indie rock and hip hop and probably not jazz. I don't think I've ever played with anyone who plays jazz, but country definitely. Punk bands for sure. A lot of punk bands. Yeah, it's definitely not like consistent in a way, but I guess like just mostly DIY bands said in parentheses. Like whatever DIY bands really means. It's like a very broad, vague term.
I don't know. Was that like DIY when you're like, it's before you get to be indie in the sense you're not even on an independent label yet? You're just self-releasing your music. Is that how we're going to define it? Maybe.
Right. Yeah, well, I think that even some bands who are on indie labels still would self-describe as being DIY bands. Because a lot of the time they're still like booking all their own shows.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing where like, I mean, you're still putting in the work no matter where you're at, I guess. I kind of like the idea of like sets being divided with like a lot of different bands instead of it all being homogenous. I think that keeps it interesting whenever I've been to shows who have like vastly different sounds. I kind of wish that we would be a push for almost more of that. That's what you're here. That's what you're going to do.
I really love mixed genre bills, and I always have. It's more fun that way. Like, I don't know, I don't want to hear four bands that all sound really similar in a row. You know, it's more fun to have some stark tonal contrast happening. It's a little more engaging. But maybe that's just because I don't play indie rock.
What does indie rock even mean?
Gosh, you're asking the wrong person.
I don't know. I'm just so weird. It's like I felt this is gonna be really dumb of me to say probably, but like I remember when first being introduced to the term indie was from like reading about like 80s and 90s bands, and like back then indie just meant like you were on an independent label or whatever. So like it wasn't even until like I was like in like probably later high school I realized like indie was like an actual like genre of a sound. And it'd be like alt rock. I thought it just meant you weren't on the radio, but it's like, oh, that's like a whole sound apparently. So who are like some of your musical inspirations or influences?
I guess like mostly contemporary artists. I I both don't have a lot of memories of my childhood, and I don't know that I like was exposed to a ton of music in my childhood. So it's mostly been bands and artists that I have found in the past like 15 or so years, and it's pretty much all people who are like actively still making music today. But one of my biggest influences is definitely Julian Baker. I also love La Dispute, and like spent years of my life listening to Between the Buried and Me.
Something I thought was really interesting in reading an article from I think back when your first album released, or you said that you really preferred like the idea of a whole album instead of stuff being broken up as I guess singles, and so you made a big effort to have all the songs flow and everything. So is that like still like your preference in terms of making music, is making it for the full album structure?
Yes, absolutely. In 2011, when I heard the album Colors by Between the Buried and Me, it completely changed the way that I experienced a collection of songs as something that could be conceptual from start to finish. I think it was the first album that I had heard that didn't even have any like breaks in between the songs. It was just like flowing song into song into song into song. And that was definitely something that impacted me in a big way in terms of how I still think of album writing today. However, it is so infuriating to be creating music with that intention in the year 2022 because people just want to listen to singles and no one listens to full albums anymore. And I won't say that no one does because I know that I do and I know that other people do. But even when you're just looking at streaming stats for any band, if you look at their whole album, you'll notice that the last few tracks on that album just don't have the same listener base that the first half of the record will. So it's a little like frustrating to think of albums conceptually in that way, but also it doesn't matter to me because like my personal artistic vision is really what I want to stick with. In like I really want to always honor my own artistic vision, so I'll always be making my albums with a concept in mind from start to finish, and the people who do end up listening to the whole thing will, you know, they'll get it.
So did you consider your album a concept album?
I don't know that I would consider it a concept album, but I guess it was all about just like being trans and coming out and like learning to accept yourself. Yeah, I guess it is a concept album about my first year of social and medical transition.
So how did you go about like deciding, I guess, the track order for the album? I know it was like a while back, so I don't know, but
Well, like it starts off, so like that album Let the Flower Grow starts off with the track Sprouts, which is basically a song that's like, I really want to kill myself. I wonder if anyone will even give a shit if I kill myself, but like said in a prettier way than saying that. And then it ends with like Severed Hands, which is kind of just like me screaming, I'm not trying to look good for you, you know, like getting from that point of like not really knowing myself, will I ever like matter to myself or anyone else, to being self-actualized and self-realized and knowing that I have inherent worth and value and that I'm doing it for myself and that I'm not doing it for anyone else.
yeah, I definitely thought there were like some motifs.
And then all the other songs are kind of like,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah. It's like just kind of like steps along the way of like growing and becoming. But like life to me is kind of just an infinitely long process of becoming. Like I'm never going to be a finished version of myself because we're all just growing every single day, you know. There's always constant unending work to do on the self, which is both beautiful and exhausting.
Yeah, I agree. Like one of my like biggest fears is to like look back in 2 years time and then be like, I'm not different at all, because it just means I'm not growing as a person.
Yeah, like I'm a completely different pitch than I was a few years ago.
One, it seems like one of the motifs of the album, there's a lot of stuff with like plants, and I'm growing in that way, using that as a metaphor, I guess. But also, like I know like the album like art itself was very like plant based, and the cover was like, or like the back cover has like you walking through like a forest. or something. So how much does like nature influence your, I guess, like self and or your songwriting?
Right. Well, as a person who doesn't have a TV or a Netflix account, if I ever want to do something for fun, I have to like go out into the woods. And I am a person who spends a lot of the time in nature. So I think that just like existing in the natural world and like spending time away from screens and clearing my mind is definitely important to my songwriting, like especially in terms of my style of songwriting is super dependent on my ability to kind of tune out from the cyber world and tune into the physical world, and I think that spending time with nature is really helpful for that.
Well, I think that's like most of what I had. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
um I don't know. When do you think that this will come out? Because then maybe I can like make a cool announcement about something that's happening.
It'll probably be a uh, it'll probably be at least 2 weeks, to be honest with you, just because it's going to take me. I edit through these and it takes like a while, and I have a very busy schedule, so I apologize. Probably at least 2 weeks. I don't know how much it could be a little bit
Cool.
longer.
I guess
than
I
that.
would just say come see me on tour this May.
Fair enough. The last question I usually like to ask people is what's a local artist or band or musician or whoever that you want to give a shout out to, like from your local area?
Oh my gosh, only one?
I mean, as many as you want. Don't feel constrained.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I can't feel constrained. I guess the first person that comes to mind is Ro Godwin. I would love to give a shout out to Ro Godwin, who is an absolutely angelic person and musician, and everyone should be following them.
Oh, you're doing just one? Or are you doing more?
Yeah, I'm just gonna do one. I don't know. It feels like so much pressure because then if I do more than one, then what if I forget people that I would want to give a shout out to? You know, there's just no way to win. It's so stressful. How could you ask me that?
Fair
I was
enough.
so unprepared.
I'm sorry. All right. So, where can people find like your music and anything like that?
You can find my music on the internet. I'm on Napster. I'm on Apple Music. I'm on Tidal, I think. I'm on Spotify, but we hate Spotify. Everybody hates Spotify, but I know you use it. You listen in wherever you're listening. It's probably on Spotify. And on Bandcamp, also on Patreon. So many unreleased things on the Patreon, and also coming soon to a city near you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Evelyn. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really, really great.
All right. Have a great one, and hope your weekend turns out right and everything goes quite grand and well. Bye.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
This interview was recorded on February 19th, 2022.